I gave my umbrella away to an old man. It felt like nothing. The next morning I found a letter that felt like everything. The letter had names and dates and a list of small crimes. Lies that ruined jobs, promises that became dust, and a single name who had taken credit for a life I had fed with my own sweat. The author asked me for one favor, with the quiet promise that if I helped, the favor would turn into a ladder, out of debt, out of shame, out of being invisible. The paper asked me to choose, stay small and keep my secret, or step up, expose them, and claim the life I had built in the dark. The rain had washed a man's coat, but the letter cleaned my past. I could not ignore it. The rain that night didn't just falling, it roared. Streets shivered under the cold water. Neon lights blurred into rippling colors on the ground. Most people hurried home, covering their heads, their eyes fixed down to avoid the puddles. But one man stood still. His name was Elias Carter, 32 years old, a factory worker who had stopped dreaming long ago. He worked late shifts at a machine shop in town, 12 hours of noise and smoke. His hands were always dark with grease, his back always aching. Every day looked the same: work, eat, sleep, repeat. No friends, no hope. Only one quiet wish: to one day open his own repair shop, small and honest, where no one could cheat him like before. That night, Elias had stayed late to cover another man's shift. He walked home through the storm with an umbrella half broken, his boots soaking wet. As he turned a corner, he saw an old man standing near a bus stop, soaked, trembling, holding a small paper bag over his head as if it could keep the rain away. People passed him like he was invisible. A group of young men even laughed as they ran by, splashing water near his feet. Elias hesitated for a moment. He had only one umbrella. His jacket was thin. The walk home was still long, but something in the old man's face stopped him. The man looked lost, and not just in the rain, but in life. His eyes were cloudy yet sharp, as if they saw something deep in Elias. Without thinking too long, Elias walked closer. "Sir," he said, shouting over the thunder, "you'll get sick out here. Take this." He handed the umbrella over. The old man blinked, surprised. You'll get drenched," he said. Elias smiled faintly. "I'm already drenched." The old man's lips curved into a tired smile. "People don't do that anymore," he whispered. "Maybe they should," Elias replied. He took the man's arm and helped him cross the slippery street. The old man's shoes made soft splashes on the wet road. When they reached the other side, the man stopped and looked at him carefully. "You remind me of someone," the old man said slowly. "Someone who lost everything but still kept helping others." Elias frowned, unsure how to answer. The old man continued, "Good hearts don't shine in comfort. They glow in storms." Elias nodded politely. He didn't understand what the man meant, but his tone stayed with him. The old man tucked the umbrella above his shoulder and smiled. "Thank you, son." Elias turned to go. "Take care," he said, walking into the rain, now without any cover. By the time he reached his small apartment, his clothes were heavy, his body shivering. But inside his chest, something felt light, something he hadn't felt in years. He made himself tea, warmed his hands, and sat by the small window. Outside, the streetlights blinked like tired eyes. Elias thought about the old man, his eyes, his calm voice, and the strange feeling that he had said something important. He laughed quietly to himself. It's just an umbrella, he thought. Nothing more. But the next morning proved him wrong. When the sun came, weak and pale, Elias opened his door to find an envelope lying on the doorstep. No name, no address, just a plain white paper sealed with a small red mark. He picked it up thinking it was junk mail. But the moment he held it, he noticed something strange. The paper smelled faintly of old wood and rain. He tore it open slowly. Inside there was a single letter written in an elegant, slightly trembling hand. "To the man who helped me last night. You don't know me, but I know you. I have something that belongs to you. Something that was taken years ago. Meet me at the old bus depot today at noon. Come alone." Elias froze. His eyes traced the words again and again. Something that was taken years ago? He couldn't think of what that meant. He didn't own much. Just old tools, a few photos of his mother, and the dreams that never worked out. But the signature, just a single letter K, stirred something in him. That name, or rather that initial, rang a faint bell from his past. Back when he used to work under a man named Harun Karim, the businessman who had once promised to make Elias a partner in a small auto shop. Elias had worked day and night, trusting him completely, until one morning Harun disappeared with all the money and papers, leaving Elias broke and humiliated. Could the letter be connected? He looked again at the paper. The handwriting looked old, maybe written by someone who had seen too much. The words were calm but carried a quiet urgency. Elias folded the letter slowly. His hands trembled, not from cold this time, but from the ghost of memory. Outside, the clouds began to gather again, the air heavy with another promise of rain. He didn't know what waited at the old bus depot, or who Kay really was, but deep inside, Elias felt it. The rain hadn't ended last night. It had only begun. The letter sat on Elias's table for almost an hour before he dared to touch it again. He had read it once, twice, and then a third time, each time slower, hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. I have something that belongs to you. Meet me at the old bus depot today at noon. Kay. The handwriting was steady but carried the weight of age. Every letter pressed deeply into the paper, like the person who wrote it had meant every word. Elias leaned back in his chair, his fingers rubbing the edge of the page. Something that belonged to him. Something that was taken years ago. He whispered to himself, what could that even mean? His small apartment was silent except for the faint ticking of an old wall clock. The morning sunlight fell weakly through the window, touching the letter like it too wanted to read it. He thought about the old man again, the wrinkled face, the calm eyes in the rain, the way he had said, "Good hearts glow in storms." Was he Kay? Elias stood up, paced the room, then stopped. The old bus depot. He knew the place, abandoned for years after the city moved the routes to a new terminal. It was quiet now, filled with dust, broken benches, and memories of people who once waited for buses that never came. Something about the location made him uneasy, but curiosity was stronger than fear. He folded the letter and tucked it carefully inside his jacket pocket. Then he grabbed his keys, took one deep breath, and stepped outside. The sky was gray again. Clouds moved low and heavy as if watching him. He walked fast, his mind full of questions. Who was Kay? What could he possibly have that belonged to Elias? And how did he know where Elias lived? The road to the depot was long. The town had changed over the years. New buildings, new people, but the same smell of wet streets and old memories. When he reached the depot, the old iron gate hung crooked, one hinge rusted loose. Inside, water dripped from a broken roof into shallow puddles. Wind moved through the empty waiting hall, making the old posters flutter softly like ghosts whispering. And there, sitting on a wooden bench under a broken clock, was the old man. He was dry this time, wearing a long gray coat, a hat pulled low. His hands rested on a cane. The umbrella Elias had given him the night before leaned beside him. Elias hesitated at the entrance. "Sir?" he called out softly. The old man turned his head and smiled faintly. "I was wondering if you'd come," he said. Elias stepped closer. "Are you the one who wrote this?" He held up the letter. The man nodded. "Yes, I am K. Karim." Elias blinked. "Karim?" The name echoed faintly in his memory. The old man gestured for him to sit. "You helped me last night without asking for anything." "That's rare. So today I'll help you without asking for anything in return." Elias frowned. "Help me? I don't understand." Karim reached into his coat and pulled out a small brown envelope. He handed it to Elias. "Open it." Inside were 2 photographs and a folded sheet of paper. The first photograph showed a younger Elias standing beside Harun Karim, the man who had once been his mentor, the man who had promised to make him a partner. They were both smiling in front of a small auto garage. The second photo showed Harun again, but this time sitting in a fancy office holding a document. On the document, faintly visible even through the photo, was Elias's signature. Elias's heart stopped. "Where did you get this?" Karim's voice softened. "From the man who used it to cheat you." Elias's hands trembled. "You mean Harun?" Karim nodded slowly. "He forged your contract, used your savings to start his company, and then erased your name from the records. I used to work with him years ago. I saw everything, and I've waited all this time for the right moment to make it right." Elias stared at the photo, unable to speak. His chest felt tight. The memories flooded back, the long nights of work, The trust he had placed, the promises of partnership, and the day he walked into the shop only to find the locks changed and his name wiped from everything. Karim leaned forward, his voice calm but heavy. He destroyed many lives, Elias. Yours was just one of them. But you, he pointed gently, you have something he doesn't. You have truth. And now proof, Elias whispered. Why now? After all these years? Karim looked away, eyes distant. Because time has its own justice. And sometimes, justice needs a messenger. For a moment, the hall was silent except for the sound of water dripping from the roof. Then Elias asked quietly, What do you want me to do with this? Karim met his gaze. You'll know when it's time. But remember this, revenge built on anger burns quickly. Revenge built on truth builds a new world. He stood slowly, his cane tapping the floor. Take the papers, read them. And when you're ready, come find me again. I live near the east edge of town by the river. Before Elias could respond, Karim walked toward the gate, his steps slow but sure. Wait, Elias called out. Why me? Why help me? Karim turned once more and said softly, Because you stopped in the rain when everyone else walked past. That told me enough. Then he was gone. Elias stood there, the envelope in his hand, the photos trembling slightly between his fingers. He could hear his own heartbeat echoing in the empty depot. For years he had buried the pain, convincing himself that the past didn't matter. But now the past had returned, handwritten, undeniable, waiting for him to decide what came next. He looked at the photograph again, Harun's smiling face frozen in pride. A slow fire began to rise inside Elias. Not wild rage, but something deeper, something steady, deliberate, and strong. He folded the photos and tucked them into his jacket. As he stepped out of the depot, the rain started again. Only this time he didn't run from it. That night, Elias didn't sleep. The photos and papers lay on the small wooden table beside his bed, whispering reminders of a past he had tried to forget. The faces, the signatures, the promises, they all stared back at him. Outside, the rain had stopped, but his thoughts still stormed. He stared at the ceiling, remembering the first time he met Harun Karim, a man who wore charm like a mask. 7 years earlier. Back then, Elias was younger, full of energy and full of belief that honesty and hard work could build anything. He worked as a junior mechanic in a small garage. His dream was simple, to open his own workshop someday, fix cars, treat customers fairly, and maybe give jobs to other struggling young men like him. He didn't want much, just respect, stability, and peace. Then Harun appeared. He was older, smooth-talking and already known in town as a businessman who helped small people grow. He drove a black car and wore a smile that made people trust him instantly. One evening, Harun came to the garage with a broken car. Elias fixed it faster than anyone else could. Impressed, Harun said, "You've got skill, son. Why waste it here? Come work for me. I'm opening a new auto center, a partnership, 50-50. Elias's eyes had shone that day. Partnership. It sounded like the door to his dream finally opened. He went home that night smiling for the first time in months. His mother had said, "See? The world rewards honest people." He had believed her. For the next 2 years, Elias worked day and night beside Harun. He handled customers, did repairs, ordered parts, managed accounts. Harun handled papers, licenses, and big clients. Elias trusted him completely. He invested every bit of savings he had, even borrowed some from friends, to buy new tools for the workshop. Harun had said, "Once we register the business, your name will be right beside mine. I promise." And Elias, being simple and hopeful, believed it. Together, they built a small but growing business called Karim Motors. But there was one problem. On every official paper, only one name appeared, Harun's. Elias asked about it once. Harun laughed and said, "Oh, don't worry, my boy. It's just for now. Paperwork is easier when it's under one name. When the renewal happens next year, I'll add you. You have my word." And again Elias believed him. A year passed. Business grew fast. Customers started praising Elias more than Haroon. "That young man knows his work. He's honest and his hands have magic." Haroon began to smile less. Then one morning Elias arrived at the workshop, and the locks had been changed. His tools were gone. The signboard was repainted. A new manager stood at the door and said coldly, "Elias Carter doesn't work here anymore." Elias's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "This is my place. I worked here." The man only shrugged. "Talk to Mr. Haroon." When Elias went to Haroon's office, the secretary stopped him at the door. "Mr. Karim is busy," she said flatly. Elias shouted, "Tell him it's Elias." "He knows me. I'm his partner." The door opened slightly and Haroon's voice came out calm and sharp. "Partner? There's no record of any partnership. You were a worker, Elias. You were paid for your time. Please don't embarrass yourself." The words hit like knives. Elias stepped back. You used my money. You used my work." Haroon smiled without shame. "I used an opportunity. You should learn to read papers before you sign them." That was the day Elias broke, not just in heart but in spirit. After that, life fell apart fast. He tried to fight legally, but without documents, no one listened. He had no savings, no job, no proof. People whispered behind his back. He was foolish. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even his mother, heartbroken, told him to forgive and move on. But inside, Elias didn't forgive. He simply grew silent. He buried his anger deep, so deep that he stopped dreaming altogether. He took small repair jobs, lived in a cheap apartment, and worked until his hands hurt. Every time he passed Haroon's big new showroom, bright lights, banners, staff wearing uniforms, he looked away. Sometimes he'd hear Haroon's voice on local TV giving business advice, talking about integrity and hard work. Elias would switch off the sound and stare at the wall. That was his revenge. Silence. But silence doesn't heal. It only hides wounds. Now sitting in the present with the envelope Karim had given him, Elias finally saw it. Proof. Evidence that Haroon's empire had been built with lies, and with his stolen sweat. He unfolded the second paper again. It wasn't just a photo. It was a copy of the forged partnership contract, the one Haroon had replaced with a fake signature. Elias's name had been signed on a page he'd never seen. His chest tightened. He whispered, "All this time, he knew I couldn't fight back." Karim's words from earlier echoed in his head. "Revenge built on anger burns quickly. Revenge built on truth builds a new world." Elias felt something shift inside him, a new kind of fire. Not blind rage, but purpose. For years Haroon had lived like a king, untouched, admired, powerful. But now he would face the one man he thought he had buried. Elias looked out the window. The night was quiet again, but the air felt different, alive, charged, waiting. He took a pen, opened a small notebook, and wrote 5 words across the page. "The truth will return home." He looked at the sentence, then underlined it once. That night he didn't feel weak anymore. He felt awake. The rain had once washed away his hope, but now it whispered of something else. Justice. The morning came slow and heavy. The city seemed quieter than usual, as if it too waited for something to happen. Elias stood by his small mirror, fixing the collar of his worn-out jacket. His reflection stared back at him with tired eyes, but there was something new behind them, a calm determination. On the table beside him lay Karim's letter, the 2 photographs, and the forged contract. He had read them so many times that he now knew every mark, every line, every curve of his stolen signature. He slipped the papers into an envelope, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and stepped out. The morning air was damp and cool. A few leftover raindrops still clung to the street signs, shining faintly like tiny truths waiting to be seen. As Elias walked, he replayed Kareem's words in his head. "Come find me when you're ready." I live near the east edge of town by the river. He was ready. The east side of town was old and quiet, once an industrial area, now half abandoned. Cracked buildings leaned over narrow alleys, paint peeling, windows dark. At the end of a small lane stood a small wooden house by the river, surrounded by wild grass. The sound of water flowing over stones filled the air. Elias knocked on the door. After a short pause, the door creaked open, and there stood Kareem, dressed simply, his silver hair neatly combed back. He smiled. "I was expecting you," Kareem said softly. Elias stepped in. The house was small but full of warmth. Books, old newspapers, a small kettle steaming gently on the stove. On the table lay a pile of papers neatly stacked. Kareem gestured to the chair. "Sit, my boy. You must be hungry. Tea first, truth later." Elias smiled faintly. He hadn't been called my boy in years. Kareem poured tea into 2 small cups, his hands steady despite his age. "I didn't sleep much last night," he said. "Not because of the rain, but because I kept thinking about you." Elias frowned slightly. "About me?" "Yes," Kareem said. "About how someone can be wronged so deeply, yet still help a stranger in the rain. That tells me your heart hasn't hardened. That's rare. And it's powerful." Elias lowered his eyes. "I don't feel powerful. I just feel tired." Kareem smiled kindly. "Tired is good. Tired men stop acting blindly. They start thinking clearly." He leaned forward. "Tell me, Elias, what do you want?" Elias took a deep breath. "I want the truth out. I want people to know what Haroun did, not just to me, but to everyone he stepped on." Kareem nodded. "Good. Because truth, once revealed, never goes back to sleep." He reached for the pile of papers on the table. "Let me show you something." He handed Elias a thin file filled with receipts, photocopies, and handwritten notes. "These," Kareem explained, "are records of how Haroun moved money from the school repair fund into his private account. He used fake company names, ghost employees, and forged invoices." Elias turned the pages slowly, his eyes wide. "You've been collecting these?" "For years," Kareem said. "I used to work for him as an accountant. At first I believed in him just like you did. But one day, I discovered he had stolen money meant for the town school. When I tried to speak up, he fired me, called me senile. People laughed at me, so I waited." Elias's hands tightened on the file. "You've been waiting all this time for justice?" Kareem nodded. "Waiting for someone who could finish what I started. Someone who had a reason, and the courage." Elias met his eyes. "And you think that's me?" "I know it is," Kareem said simply. "You are not seeking revenge. You're seeking truth. That's what makes you dangerous." They spent hours talking, piecing together events, connecting dots, matching dates and receipts. Every line in Kareem's old handwriting led back to one man, Haroun Kareem. Elias began to see the scale of the corruption, not just his stolen business, but a chain of lies that had hurt many people. Families who lost jobs, children who never saw the promised school repairs, workers unpaid for months. Each name they uncovered added to the quiet anger that burned inside him. When the tea grew cold and the sun began to fade, Kareem leaned back and said, "Now, we need a plan." Elias nodded. "What kind of plan?" "The kind that doesn't just expose one man," Kareem said, "but teaches a whole town to open its eyes." He stood, walking to a cabinet. He opened it carefully and pulled out a small dusty tape recorder. "Old but useful," he said. Elias frowned. "What's that for?" Kareem's lips curved into a small knowing smile. "Sometimes people confess when they think no one is listening." Elias stared at the recorder, then slowly understood. "You want to get him talking?" Elias said. "Yes," Kareem replied. Harun still believes no one dares question him. But pride makes men careless. If we find the right bait, he'll hang himself with his own words. Elias hesitated. And if he doesn't fall for it? Kareem's smile faded. Then we find witnesses. People he wronged, the clerk, the drivers, the suppliers. They all know something. We gather proof quietly, and when the time is right, we bring it all to light. No shouting, no chaos, just truth cold and clean. Elias nodded slowly. And after that? Kareem looked out the window, his voice low. Then you'll have what was taken from you. Your name, your dignity, and something even greater. Peace. As the day ended, Elias stood at the riverbank outside the house. The sky was painted with orange and gray, the water glimmering like liquid glass. Kareem joined him, his cane tapping softly on the stones. You know, the old man said quietly, when I was young I thought revenge was about making others suffer. But I learned too late that real revenge is rebuilding what they tried to destroy. Better, stronger, cleaner. Elias looked at the water. I think I understand. Kareem smiled faintly. You will? Soon. They stood in silence for a moment, two men watching the slow current carry away fallen leaves. Then Kareem added softly, The storm is coming again, Elias. Be ready. Truth has a way of shaking even the strongest walls. Elias nodded, his jaw set. Let it come. And as the first drop of rain touched his hand, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in years. A purpose that burned quietly, but brightly in his chest. The days that followed changed Elias's life forever. He woke up each morning with a new rhythm, not the tired drag of a factory worker, but the steady beat of a man on a mission. He began visiting Kareem every evening by the river. The two worked like shadows, quietly, carefully, always watching. Kareem's small house became their secret office. The table was covered with old receipts, ledgers, and notebooks. Each paper was a fragment of truth. Elias treated every page like a weapon, reading, cross-checking, arranging them in neat piles. Sometimes Kareem would say, Patience, Elias. Truth doesn't shout. It whispers, until someone brave enough listens. Elias listened. One night, as the wind rustled the curtains, Kareem opened an old box and placed a folder before Elias. This, he said, is where we start. Inside were a series of signed invoices and photocopies of bank transfers. Each one carried the stamp of Kareem Motors, Harun's company. These are payments made for school repair work, Kareem explained, but the money never reached the contractors. It went into fake accounts created under names that don't exist. He pointed to one particular invoice dated 2 years ago, for the roof repairs of the town's public school. Harun took this money himself, Kareem said. I saw the withdrawal slip. Elias frowned. You saw it? I did. But seeing isn't enough in this world. We need others who can prove it. He paused, then added, There's someone. A clerk named Mina. She worked in the accounts department back then. If anyone still remembers the truth, it's her. Elias made a note of the name in his small notebook. Mina, he repeated. Where can we find her? Kareem smiled faintly. She runs a small stationery shop now. Same street where the school used to be repaired. Be gentle with her. She's been scared for a long time. The next day, Elias went alone. The shop was small. Stacks of notebooks, pens, and school bags. A woman in her late 40s stood behind the counter counting change. Her hair was tied back, her eyes tired but alert. Elias stepped forward. Are you Mina Rahman? She looked up quickly. Yes, do I know you? He hesitated, then said softly, My name is Elias Carter. I used to work for Harun Kareem. Her hands froze. A shadow crossed her face. Why are you here? Elias took out one of the forged invoices from his pocket and placed it on the counter. Because I think you know this document isn't real. Mina stared at it for a long time. Her throat moved, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, How did you get this? From someone who wants justice, Elias said. Someone who was hurt by him, like you were. Mina's fingers trembled as she touched the paper. You don't understand, she said quietly. People tried to expose him before. They lost jobs. Some had to leave town. Elias leaned forward. I'm not here to make noise. I'm here to tell the truth. Carefully, safely, but completely. He saw tears gather in her eyes. I used to sign these documents under pressure, she said. He told me it was for management use. I believed him at first. Then I found out the truth. The money meant for school repairs went straight into his private accounts. When I tried to question him, he threatened me. She stopped, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. I have a child. I couldn't risk it. So I stayed silent. Elias's voice softened. You don't have to be silent anymore, Mina. There's proof now. There are others and we'll protect you. She looked at him with fear and hope mixed together. You don't know how dangerous he is. Elias straightened his back. I know exactly how dangerous he is. He placed his hand gently over the invoice. And that's why I can't walk away. Mina was silent for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out an old, worn ledger. If this helps you, she said, take it. These are copies of all transactions from those years. I kept them because I couldn't sleep knowing what I'd signed. Elias took the ledger carefully, his eyes meeting hers. You've just given back a piece of truth to the world. Mina smiled weakly. Be careful, Mr. Elias. Truth makes enemies faster than lies. That night, Elias returned to Karim's house with the ledger wrapped in brown paper. Karim listened to his story silently, nodding slowly. When Elias placed the ledger on the table, Karim's old eyes filled with pride. You did well, he said softly. The storm has begun to move. He opened the ledger and traced a line with his finger. These entries match our papers exactly. This is enough to shake the foundation of his lies. Elias asked. Is it enough to bring him down? Karim sighed. Not yet. Truth needs to be seen by eyes that matter, and protected by those who won't look away. We'll need one more thing, a confession. He tapped the tape recorder sitting beside him. Elias stared at it. You really think he'll talk? Karim smiled faintly. Pride makes powerful men careless. Harun still believes the world fears him. He thinks no one remembers his crimes. Elias nodded slowly. So we remind him. Karim's voice grew serious. Be cautious. Don't confront him yet. Not until we have everything. He's dangerous, Elias. He's built his power on silence and fear. Elias clenched his fists. Then let's make noise. The kind that can't be ignored. Karim smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. That's the spirit. But remember, we use the truth, not anger. One wrong step and he'll twist it against you. Elias nodded. I understand. As he turned to leave, Karim said quietly, One more thing, Elias. When this is over, don't let hatred live inside you. Let justice do its work. That's how you win. Elias paused at the door, his silhouette framed by the fading sunlight. I don't want to destroy him, Karim. I want to end what he built on my name. Karim smiled. Then the truth is your greatest weapon. Outside, the evening breeze carried the smell of rain again. Elias looked up at the clouds, dark, thick, and restless. He felt no fear now, only a strange calm. For the first time in years, he wasn't the man who had lost everything. He was the man about to take it all back. For the next few days, Karim's house by the river became the heart of a quiet storm. Stacks of papers, photographs, receipts, and ledgers covered the table. The air inside carried the smell of old ink and black tea. Elias spent hours cross-checking every line, every number, every signature. Karim sat beside him, sometimes reading, sometimes thinking in silence, like a chess player planning a match that would decide lives. Outside, the river flowed calmly. Inside, two men prepared to shake an empire. One evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, Elias put down his pen and looked up. We have proof, he said. Receipts, ledgers, Mina's testimony. But if we just hand this to the police, Harun will find a way to twist it. He has connections everywhere. Karim nodded slowly. You're right. Men like him don't fall through law alone. They fall when the people stop believing their lies. Elias frowned. So what do we do? Karim's eyes glimmered with quiet fire. We build a story. One so true, so undeniable that no one can silence it. He leaned forward, tapping the table. 3 steps, Elias, just 3. We already have Mina, Karim said. But we'll need more. People who saw, who heard, who were hurt. His old driver. The supplier who was never paid. Maybe even one of his staff who quit. Elias took notes quickly. I know one name, he said. Tariq, he was a driver for Karim Motors. Harun fired him for refusing to deliver special packages without papers. I met him once years ago. Karim nodded. Find him. Carefully. Tell him the truth. And that he's not alone anymore. Elias looked at the dark river outside the window. He might be scared, Karim smiled faintly. Fear keeps the innocent quiet. Courage makes them loud. Be patient. Courage grows when it feels understood. Karim reached for the small tape recorder on the shelf. This old thing still works, he said, pressing play. The faint click of the buttons echoed through the quiet room. Harun's pride will be his downfall. We need him to talk about the fake contracts, the school money, and you. Elias frowned. He'll never confess, Karim smiled. Not if you confront him directly. But if he believes you want to make peace, he'll open his mouth. Pride always wants to explain itself. Elias thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can go to him. Pretend I want to forgive, to move on. Tell him I just want closure. Karim's eyes softened. Exactly. You meet him, keep calm. Let him talk. And this, he lifted the recorder. We'll listen. Elias took the recorder, feeling its weight in his hand. It was small, simple, unremarkable, but it felt heavier than steel. When we have his words and the witnesses, Karim continued, we don't go to the police first. We go to the people, the town hall, the journalists, anyone who'll listen. We let truth become public before power can bury it. Elias looked at him carefully. That could make us targets. Karim nodded. It could, but it will also make us free. Silence filled the room for a long moment. Rain began to patter against the window. Elias could hear his own heartbeat. Then he said quietly, I'll do it. Karim smiled. I knew you would. The next day, Elias began step 1. He found Tariq working at a small roadside repair shop. The man looked older, his beard graying, his face lined with fatigue. When Elias mentioned Harun's name, Tariq froze like a man hearing thunder too close. I don't want trouble, Tariq said. That man ruined my life once already. Elias placed his hand on the table. I'm not asking you to fight him. Just to tell the truth. I was one of his victims too. Tariq studied him for a moment, then sighed. He made me deliver boxes labeled as spare parts. Inside were documents and money. When I refused once, he said he'd make sure no one ever hired me again. He kept his word. Elias leaned closer. Would you repeat that if others stood beside you? Tariq hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. If others speak, I'll speak. Elias smiled. You're not alone anymore. He wrote Tariq's name on the list and shook his hand. For the first time in years, Tariq smiled, faintly but with relief. Back at Karim's house, Elias added Tariq's testimony to the growing pile. Karim looked proud but cautious. Good, he said. One more candle in the dark. Elias exhaled. He's scared, but he'll stand. They always do, Karim said. When they see hope, they remember their voice. He paused, then looked at Elias. Now comes the hardest part. Your meeting with Harun. Elias's jaw tightened. I'll face him. Karim studied him closely. Don't let anger control your words. You'll want to shout. You'll want to hit. But remember, a calm man scares a guilty one more than a loud one ever could. Elias nodded slowly. I'll stay calm, Karim smiled. Good. Because when you stay calm, he'll try to fill the silence, and in that silence he'll hang himself. That night, Elias sat alone in his apartment, holding the tape recorder in his hands. He pressed play. It made a small mechanical hum. He imagined Harun's smooth voice captured inside it, bragging, lying, slipping. The idea made his pulse quicken. He turned off the recorder and placed it beside his pillow. Then he whispered to himself, "You took my name, my work, my years, but tomorrow you'll give it all back." He lay down but couldn't sleep. His mind kept running, rehearsing words, imagining Harun's face, remembering the pain. When dawn came, he was still awake, calm, ready, and sharper than ever before. At sunrise, Elias returned to Karim's house one last time before the meeting. Karim stood by the river watching the water. "Are you ready?" he asked. Elias nodded. "More than I've ever been." Karim turned to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Elias, truth doesn't need to shout. Just speak it with a steady heart." Elias smiled faintly. "I'll remember." Karim handed him the recorder. "Let the river carry your fear away." Elias pocketed it, looked out at the moving water, and said softly, "It's time to end this." The morning was quiet, but the quiet felt heavy, the kind that comes before a storm. Elias walked down the narrow street, the tape recorder in his pocket, his breath steady. He was no longer just a man wronged. He was now a man with purpose. Each step he took felt heavier, not with fear, but with meaning. Behind him, the river shimmered in the distance, carrying Karim's words with him. Truth doesn't shout, Elias. It walks quietly, and then it shakes the ground. Over the next week, Elias moved carefully. He met Mina again, this time with a calm confidence that gave her courage. Then he brought Tariq to Karim's house by the river. The meeting was slow at first. Silence, awkwardness, nervous glances. But when Mina placed her hand on the ledger and said softly, "I signed these papers under pressure," something changed. Tariq looked up, his voice rough but honest. "And I drove boxes full of cash thinking it was car parts. The guilt still wakes me up at night." Karim sat back, nodding quietly, letting their words fill the air. Elias watched them both, realizing that truth, once spoken aloud, has a strange power. It connects pain with purpose. When they were done, Karim poured tea and said, "You both did something brave today. Most people spend years running from their truth. You two stopped running." Mina smiled faintly. "It feels lighter," she whispered. Karim nodded. "Because silence is heavier than truth." That night, Elias stayed behind after Mina and Tariq left. He sat near the small lamp as Karim organized the papers again. The sound of rustling paper filled the room. "Do you think this will be enough?" Elias asked quietly. Karim looked up. "Not yet. We have voices, but we need ears. People willing to listen when we speak." He pointed toward the old tape recorder. "Tomorrow you meet Harun. You'll go in as the calm man who wants peace. That's when pride will open his mouth. Once we have his words, no one will be able to deny what he's done." Elias exhaled slowly. "And if he realizes what I'm doing?" Karim smiled, the kind of smile that only old fighters have. "Then he'll try to silence you, and that's when he'll make his biggest mistake." The next morning, Elias ironed his shirt for the first time in years. He looked in the mirror. His face was leaner now, his eyes sharper. The man staring back at him was no longer the mechanic who got cheated. He was the storm that life had tried to bury. He slipped the recorder into his pocket, adjusted his jacket, and headed out. Harun's office was in the heart of the city. Tall glass windows, golden nameplates, and guards in neat uniforms. Elias walked past them calmly. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. When the receptionist asked for his name, he said simply, "Tell Mr. Karim that Elias Carter is here." Her eyebrows rose slightly. She made a call, spoke softly, then said, "He'll see you." Elias nodded and stepped into the elevator. His reflection in the steel door looked like a man walking toward his own past. Harun's office was large, full of expensive furniture and fake smiles. He sat behind a polished desk, his silver watch shining under the light. The same man, the same charming liar, but older now, his arrogance still sharp as glass. He looked up, surprised. "Elias, I didn't expect to see you again." Elias smiled faintly. "I figured it was time." Harun leaned back. "Still holding on to the past, I see." Elias walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "No, I came to end it." Harun's eyebrows rose. "End it? How?" Elias sat down slowly. "I want peace, Harun. I've been angry too long. I just want to understand." "Why?" Harun smirked.
Why what?
Elias kept his tone calm. "Why you took it all, the shop, the money, my name? I want to hear it from you." Harun laughed softly. "Oh, Elias, you were too naive. Business is about timing and control. You had skill, but no sense. I built the empire. You were just part of the labor." Elias nodded slowly. "So all those promises? The partnership, the papers?" Harun shrugged. "Deals change. You think I could build Kareem Motors with a sentimental fool by my side? You should thank me. I taught you how the world really works." Inside Elias's jacket, the tape recorder quietly clicked. He stayed still, his face calm. "You destroyed me, Harun," he said quietly. Harun smiled, unbothered. "No, Elias, you destroyed yourself by trusting too much." He leaned forward, his voice sharp and cold. "You think anyone cares who you are now? You're a nobody, and if you ever try to stir trouble again, I can make sure you disappear." Elias looked at him for a long moment, and then smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid anymore." Harun frowned. "You should be." Elias stood. "No. You should be." He turned and walked out, leaving Harun staring, confused by the calm in his eyes. Outside, Elias's hands shook slightly as he reached into his pocket and pressed stop on the recorder. It had captured every word, every confession, every threat, every piece of his arrogance. He exhaled, steadying himself. The revenge he had once dreamed of, shouting, hitting, breaking, suddenly felt small compared to this quiet victory. He didn't need violence. He had truth. That night, Elias went straight to Kareem's house. When he played the tape, the old man listened in silence. Harun's voice filled the room, smooth, confident, and then careless. When it ended, Kareem sat back slowly and whispered, "There it is. The sound of a man burying himself." Elias smiled for the first time in days. "It's done." Kareem shook his head gently. "No, Elias, it's only beginning. Now the world must hear him." A few days later, Mina and Tariq joined them again. When they heard the recording, both sat in stunned silence. Mina covered her mouth. "He actually said all that?" Elias nodded. Word for word. Tariq clenched his fists. "People need to hear this," Kareem smiled. "And they will. But not yet. The truth must be shown, not shouted." He pointed at the tape. "This will be played. In the town hall, in front of the mayor, the press, and the people he deceived. When the time comes, Harun will face the same crowd he once fooled. That's real justice." Elias looked out the window. The night sky was full of clouds again, thick, heavy, waiting to break. He whispered, "Then let's make sure it rains on him." The next morning started like any other. But by midday, Elias knew something had changed. As he walked to the factory for his shift, he noticed a black car parked across the street. Windows tinted, engine idling. Inside, two men sat still, faces barely visible behind the glass. When Elias looked directly at them, the car rolled away. Slow, casual, but deliberate. He stood there for a moment, heart steady, but his gut cold. He knew what this meant. Harun had heard whispers. Later that night at Kareem's house, the river was louder than usual. The wind howled, pushing through the cracks in the window. Elias placed his bag on the table and said quietly, "They're watching me." Kareem didn't look surprised. He poured tea calmly. "Of course they are. You shook the hand of a man who lives on lies. He's nervous now." Elias sat, rubbing his temples. "It's not just me. They might follow Mina, Tariq." Kareem's eyes lifted. Then we moved faster. He stood slowly, his cane tapping against the floor. Fear is his last weapon. If we let it stop us, we become like the ones who stayed silent. Elias looked at him, seeing not just an old man but a survivor, one who had faced storms before and refused to bow. Kareem smiled faintly. Truth is like a river, my boy. You can't stop it. You can only delay its flood. The next day, Elias went to check on Mina. Her shop door was locked, the shutters half closed. He knocked gently. No answer. He called her name. Mina, it's Elias. And after a few seconds, she opened the door a crack. Her face was pale, eyes wide. They came, she whispered. 2 men. Said they were from Kareem Motors. They asked if I'd been talking to anyone about Mr. Haroon. They warned me to forget old stories. Elias felt a chill run through him. Did they hurt you? No, she said, shaking her head. But I'm scared. Elias nodded. You're not alone, Mina. They can scare us, but they can't silence us forever. He looked down the street. The same black car from yesterday was parked near the corner. Its headlights flashed once, then went off. Elias took a deep breath. Pack your things, he said. You'll stay near Kareem's for a few days. It's safer there. When he returned to Kareem's house, the old man was sitting by the window watching the rain. They've started, Elias said. Kareem nodded. I know. They called me too. Elias froze. They called you? Kareem smiled faintly. A polite voice asking if I'd like to stop digging into old matters. I told him I don't dig, I reveal. Elias shook his head. We should go to the police. Kareem's smile faded. And tell them what? That a powerful man's pride is cracking? Half the police owe him favors, Elias. No. We finish what we started. Then, when the truth is public, the law will have no choice but to act. Elias sighed, but deep down he knew Kareem was right. They were too far in to turn back. That night, Kareem spread the papers out one last time. Mina's ledger, Tariq's statements, the recordings. He organized everything into a brown folder marked Truth. Then he handed Elias a copy of the recording. Keep this with you always. If anything happens to me, you make sure this is played in public. Elias frowned. Don't talk like that. Kareem smiled, a little tired. Every man who fights darkness prepares for the shadows it brings. Elias looked at the old man, at his calm, at the quiet wisdom in his eyes. I won't let anything happen to you, Kareem chuckled softly. You can't control storms, Elias. You can only hold your ground. The next evening, Elias noticed something strange again. As he walked home, the streetlights flickered. The same black car was parked at the corner, but this time the driver stepped out, tall, wearing a dark coat. He didn't approach. He just stood there, smoking, watching. Elias met his gaze without flinching. Then, deliberately, he crossed the street toward him. The man dropped the cigarette and said, You should stop asking questions. Elias stopped 2 feet away. And if I don't? The man smiled, not with humor, but with warning. Then we'll make you stop. Elias looked him straight in the eye. Tell Haroon this. I'm not the same man he betrayed. The man's smirk faded. He got back into the car and drove off, leaving tire marks on the wet road. Elias stood there breathing hard, the wind blowing against his face. His fear had changed into something else. Steel. He whispered, You can threaten me, but you can't silence truth. Back at Kareem's, he told the old man everything. Kareem nodded slowly. He's scared. When powerful men send threats, it means they've lost control. He poured 2 cups of tea, his hands shaking slightly. Tomorrow, he said, we move to the final stage. Elias frowned. Tomorrow? Kareem looked out the window. The mayor holds his public meeting at the town hall tomorrow afternoon. People will be there, reporters too. We'll bring the evidence there quietly, and when the time is right, we'll play the tape. Elias's pulse quickened. Tomorrow? It ends, Kareem smiled. Yes, but not with violence, Elias, and with truth. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He walked to the riverbank behind Kareem's house. The moonlight shimmered on the water like 1,000 broken mirrors. He took the recorder from his pocket, holding it tightly. The sound of Haroon's voice still echoed in his head. "You think anyone cares who you are now? You're a nobody," Elias whispered to the dark sky. "Tomorrow everyone will know who I am." The wind picked up, carrying his words across the river, like a promise returning home. As dawn crept in, the city awoke to another gray morning. But inside Elias, the storm was already alive. He was no longer afraid of the men, the cars, or the threats. He had something stronger, the power of truth sharpened by patience. And in the distance, at Kareem Motors, Haroon sat at his desk, restless. His phone buzzed every few minutes with updates, people talking, rumors spreading. He could feel it too. Something was coming. He looked out the window and muttered under his breath, "Whoever is behind this, I'll destroy them." But this time, for the first time, Haroon didn't sound confident. He sounded afraid. The next day arrived like the calm before thunder. The air in the town was heavy, gray clouds thick above the rooftops. People moved quickly on the streets, unaware that by noon their world would change, that a secret built on lies was about to collapse. Elias stood by the window of Kareem's small house, watching the sky. On the table behind him lay the brown folder marked Truth. Inside it, the ledgers, the signed invoices, the witness statements, and the recorder. Kareem came out of his room, cane tapping lightly on the floor. His clothes were neat, a simple gray suit pressed and clean. "You ready, my boy?" he asked softly. Elias nodded. "More than ever." Kareem smiled faintly. "Remember, you don't fight him with anger. You fight him with proof." Elias looked at the folder. "Proof and patience. I've waited long enough." By noon, the town hall buzzed with chatter. Reporters, businessmen, local officials, and townspeople filled the room. The mayor was scheduled to give a speech about transparency and progress, and sitting in the front row, proud, confident, surrounded by smiles, was Haroon Kareem. He wore a sharp black suit, his silver watch glinting under the lights. His name was on the banner behind the stage. Kareem Motors, a partner in the city's growth. When Elias entered the hall with Kareem beside him, heads turned. Some whispered, others stared. Haroon's smile stiffened for just a moment before returning. Kareem whispered, "He didn't expect you'd come this far." Elias's gaze was steady. "He's about to find out how far I'll go." They sat quietly at the back. Kareem placed the recorder on the table in front of them, covered by his folded newspaper. The mayor began his speech, full of polite words and practiced smiles. He thanked Haroon for his generous donations and commitment to education. Haroon nodded humbly, enjoying the praise. Then halfway through, the mayor said, "We would like to open the floor for public remarks." Kareem looked at Elias. "Now." Elias stood slowly. The hall went quiet. All eyes turned to the man who once worked in the shadows. He walked to the front, calm and clear, holding the brown folder in his hand. "Mr. Mayor," he said softly, "may I speak?" The mayor blinked, uncertain. "Yes, of course, Mr. Elias Carter," he said. Haroon's head turned sharply. His eyes widened for the briefest second before he composed himself. Elias continued, "I want to talk about this man, Haroon Kareem, and the truth behind his success." The room rustled with murmurs. Haroon stood, trying to control his expression. "Mayor, I don't think this—" Elias raised his voice slightly. "You'll want to hear this, Haroon, because it's time everyone else does too." Elias opened the folder and pulled out Mina's ledger. "This," he said, "is proof that the school fund you were supposed to manage never reached the children. It went into fake accounts and ones you created." He held up another paper. "This is the signed invoice. The handwriting matches yours." The mayor looked confused. "Mr. Kareem, is this true?" Haroon forced a laugh. "This is absurd. These documents could be fabricated." Elias stepped closer. "Then maybe you can explain this." He reached into his jacket and took out the recorder. The small device looked harmless. but everyone could feel the weight it carried. He pressed play. The hall filled with Harun's own voice. You were too naive, Elias. You had skill, but no sense. I built the empire. You were just part of the labor. You think anyone cares who you are now? You're a nobody. Gasps spread across the room. Reporters raised their cameras. The mayor froze. Harun's face turned pale. That recording... It's fake. Karim stood slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice, though old, carried strength. Fake, you say? Then why does it sound exactly like you admitting your crime in your own office 2 days ago? The crowd began to whisper loudly now, some in disbelief, others in anger. Flashbulbs from cameras popped. Harun took a step back, his confident posture crumbling. You set me up, he shouted. Elias's voice stayed calm. No, Harun. You set yourself up the day you decided to steal from people who trusted you. He turned to the mayor. These papers and this recording will go to the local press and the city council. You wanted transparency, now you have it. Harun's calm broke completely. You can't do this to me? Do you know who I am? Elias met his eyes. Yes, I know exactly who you are, and now so does everyone else. The mayor turned to security. Please escort Mr. Karim out until this can be investigated. 2 guards approached. Harun tried to protest, shouting words no one cared to hear anymore. The crowd's murmurs turned into a wave of noise, disapproval, shock, relief. Karim placed a steady hand on Elias's shoulder. You did it, he whispered. Elias exhaled slowly. His chest felt light, lighter than it had in years. As Harun was led out, their eyes met one last time. The same man who once stood above him now looked smaller, desperate, cornered, stripped of his power. Outside the hall, the storm finally broke. Rain poured down in thick sheets, drenching the streets. Elias stepped into it without hesitation, letting it wash over him. Karim joined him, smiling softly. Funny, isn't it? The rain started the story, and it's ending it too, Elias nodded. No, it's not ending it, Karim, it's cleansing it. Karim chuckled quietly. You've learned well. Elias looked up at the gray sky. He built his life on lies. Now it's time we build ours on truth. They walked together through the rain, not as victims anymore, but as men reborn. Behind them, inside the hall, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. The truth that had slept for 7 long years was finally awake, and this time it wouldn't be silent again. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down in endless waves, washing over the streets, drumming softly on rooftops, as if the heavens themselves had chosen to cleanse the town. By morning, the city was awake with whispers. Every newspaper, every radio station, every phone screen carried the same name, Harun Karim. Headlines screamed, local businessman accused of corruption. Recording. Leaks, Harun Karim's shocking. Admission. Karim Motors under investigation for fraud. The empire that once stood untouchable now trembled, under the weight of truth. In his office, Harun sat alone. The room that had once been filled with calls, meetings, and flattery now echoed with silence. His phone buzzed nonstop. Clients demanding answers, partners withdrawing, banks freezing accounts. He slammed his fist on the desk. They can't do this to me, he shouted. But his own voice sounded small inside the huge room. He looked out the window. The rain blurred his reflection. A man who had traded his soul for a name. For years he had believed he was untouchable. But he had never understood one simple rule. Truth travels slowly, but it always arrives. He picked up the newspaper on his desk. There it was, a photo of him, mid-yell, being escorted out of the town hall. Below it, the headline, From Hero to Villain, Karim Motors founder exposed. His hands trembled as he threw the paper away. He had built everything, the business, the power, the reputation, by standing on the backs of those he crushed. And now one of those men had risen from the dust, Elias Carter. The name echoed in his mind like thunder. He whispered it under his breath. Elias, you'll regret this. But even as he said it, his voice cracked, as if he no longer believed his own threats. Meanwhile, across town, Kareem's small house by the river was filled with quiet joy. Mina arrived first, carrying sweets. Tariq came next, bringing tea. They laughed for the first time in weeks, their faces lighter, their voices free. Elias stood by the window, watching the rain ripple across the river. He wasn't smiling, not yet. Just as he realized, doesn't bring happiness immediately. It brings peace, slowly, quietly, like dawn after a long night. Kareem walked to his side. You look like a man who won but still carries a heavy heart, he said softly. Elias sighed. He deserved it, Kareem, every bit of it. But still. It feels strange, Kareem nodded. That's because revenge satisfies the mind, not the soul. What you did wasn't revenge, Elias. It was correction. Elias turned to him. Correction? Yes, Kareem said. You didn't destroy a man. You corrected a lie. You balanced the scale. Elias looked down at the folder on the table, the same one labeled truth. It was open now, papers slightly damp from the rain. He picked up one photo, the one of him and Haroon standing side by side years ago, smiling in front of the old garage. He stared at it for a long time. Then he tore it in half. Half of it, Haroon's face, fell to the floor. The other half, Elias's face, and he tucked inside his wallet. Kareem smiled softly. That's the right kind of victory. Over the next few days, investigators swarmed Kareem Motors. Bank records were seized, computers taken, employees questioned. More and more evidence came to light. Hidden accounts, fake contracts, ghost employees. The town that once praised Haroon now turned its back. People whispered his name like it was poison. Even his closest allies disappeared overnight. Mina was called to testify, and she spoke clearly, no longer trembling. Tariq too told his story publicly, his voice strong, his eyes steady. Every word they spoke added another brick to the wall of truth. And when the recordings were officially verified, there was no more room for denial. The same reporters who once praised Haroon now stood outside his gates, shoving microphones toward his face. Mr. Kareem, do you admit to the allegations? Is it true you forged partnership documents? Did you threaten your former employee, Elias Carter? But Haroon had no answers left. Only silence. And silence now was guilt. 1 week later, a small headline appeared in the paper. Kareem Motors founder steps down. Investigation continues. No one cared for the details. The town had already chosen its side, and this time the side was truth. Elias didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. He simply went back to the workshop he rented, and small, old, but his. He painted the sign himself. Carter Repairs. Honest work, honest hands. It wasn't grand. It wasn't famous. But it was pure. As he wiped the paintbrush clean, Mina arrived with her son carrying snacks. Tariq came too, bringing some spare tools. They laughed as they helped him set up. Kareem watched from the doorway, smiling proudly, his old eyes glimmering with pride. The little shop smelled of oil, wood, and a new beginning. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Elias stepped outside. The rain had finally stopped. The street shimmered clean and quiet. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "You took my umbrella that night, Kareem, and gave me something much greater. My life back." Kareem chuckled softly beside him. Sometimes a storm isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to reveal who can stand in it. Elias smiled. Then let the rain come again. I'm ready now, Kareem nodded slowly. You're not just ready, Elias. You're reborn. The two men stood side by side as the last bit of sunlight touched the river in the distance. The same river that had carried their fears, now carrying their peace. And somewhere in the city, Haroon watched the same sunset through the bars of his pride. A man who once ruled, now alone, finally learning that empires built on lies can't survive the weight of truth. Weeks passed. The storm that once swallowed the town had finally quieted. But its rain had washed something clean. The lies, the fear, the silence. For the first time in years, the city felt honest again. Billboards that once showed Haroon's smiling face were taken down. People who used to lower their voices when talking about corruption now spoke freely. And at the corner of a quiet street, far from the noise of big businesses, a small new sign hung proudly over a modest shop. It wasn't much, and cracked walls, rusty tools, an old counter, but to Elias, it was everything. It was proof that truth, though slow, had brought him home. Every morning, Elias opened the shutters at sunrise. He swept the floor, polished his few machines, and brewed tea before work began. At first there were no customers, just curious eyes passing by. Some recognized him. Some whispered. But slowly, quietly, one person walked in, then another, then more. "Your name's in the paper, isn't it?" one man said, handing over his broken bike. Elias nodded politely.
"Yes, sir."
"But I fix things better than papers do." The man laughed, and that laughter spread. Word traveled fast. "The man who stood against Kareem now fixes your car for half the price, and does it right." In a few weeks, Carter Repairs became more than a shop. It became a symbol, a place built on honesty, where people found both help and hope. Mina came often, helping with accounts. Her son sat in the corner, doing homework, sometimes laughing with Elias. Tariq brought spare tools from old garages. And every evening, Kareem would visit with a small basket of tea and biscuits. The shop became a family, not of blood, but of shared truth. One afternoon, as the sun poured gold through the windows, Kareem sat on the bench watching Elias work. The old man smiled quietly. "You work like a man who has finally forgiven the world," he said. Elias looked up, wiping grease from his hands. "I think I have." Kareem tilted his head. "Even him?" Elias paused. "Haroon?" The question lingered in the air like a ghost between them. After a long silence, Elias said softly, "Yes." "Even him." Kareem's eyes glimmered with pride. "That's when you truly win, my boy. When you forgive the man who wronged you, not because he deserves it, but because you deserve peace." Elias smiled faintly. "He taught me something I never expected. What kind of man I never want to become." Kareem nodded. "Then his greatest punishment is that he helped create your strength." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunlight bounce off the river in the distance. As the months went on, Elias's shop grew. He hired 2 young apprentices, boys from poor families who reminded him of his younger self. He paid them fairly, taught them everything he knew, and told them one rule every morning. "In this shop we fix things on not just machines, but trust." One of the boys once asked, "Why do you always say that?" Elias smiled. "Because I lost everything once, not from fire or theft, but from broken trust. So now I build with honesty." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but the words stayed with him. In time, people started calling Elias something new. The man who repaired not just engines, but hearts. Journalists came for interviews, but Elias avoided the spotlight. He would simply say, "I'm no hero. I'm just someone who finally stopped running from truth." One evening, a letter arrived at his shop. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, deliberate. Inside, a single line. "Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like." From someone who once lost it. There was no name, but Elias didn't need one. He folded the letter quietly, his heart full of something strange. Not triumph, not revenge, but peace. He placed it in the same drawer where Kareem's first letter still lay, the one that had started it all. Later that night, Elias closed the shop and walked to the river. The moonlight shimmered on the water. Kareem stood there, his hands behind his back, gazing at the current. "Do you ever think about that night in the rain?" Elias asked. Kareem chuckled softly. "Every day. I think about how a small act of kindness can change the path of a man's life. Elias nodded. I gave you my umbrella that night, but I didn't know you'd give me back my purpose. Karim smiled warmly. Purpose finds those who stay kind even when life isn't. They stood side by side, two men who had both lost and found themselves in the same storm. The air smelled of rain again, gentle, familiar, cleansing. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Karim's visits became less frequent. His health grew weaker, but his spirit never dimmed. On his last visit, he handed Elias a small box. Open it when I'm gone, he said softly. Elias frowned. Don't talk like that, Karim smiled. Every river flows into the sea eventually. Mine's almost there. A few weeks later, Karim passed away peacefully in his sleep. The town mourned him quietly, but Elias felt it the most. When he opened the box, he found inside a simple gold pen and a folded note. To Elias, you fixed what I couldn't. Keep building even when it rains. Karim, Elias held the pen close to his heart. Tears rolled down his face, not of pain, but of gratitude. He placed the pen on his shop's counter right next to the register where everyone could see it. And whenever someone asked about it, he would smile and say, that pen belonged to the man who taught me that truth is the strongest tool. By the end of that year, Carter Repairs wasn't just a workshop, it was a story, a place where people came not only to fix their cars but to remember that honesty still mattered. And every evening, when Elias closed the shutters, he would whisper to himself, this is my revenge, to live a good life, clean and true. Then he'd look out at the river, the same river where it all began, and softly add, thank you, Karim, you turned my storm into light. It was a quiet morning. The rain had returned, soft, steady, familiar. The kind that didn't frighten the streets anymore but washed them gently, as if blessing everything it touched. Elias stood inside his shop, wiping the counter. The sign above the door, "We Carter Repairs, honest work, honest hands," swayed lightly in the breeze. The kettle whistled softly. Mina's laughter echoed from the back as her son stacked boxes near the shelves. Everything was normal, peaceful. Until Elias noticed something lying at the doorstep, a white envelope, slightly wet from the rain. He froze. It looked almost exactly like the one from that night. The one Karim had left on his door. The one that started it all. He bent down, picked it up gently, and felt his heart begin to pound. No name, no address, and only his written in familiar handwriting. For a long moment he just stared at it. Then with trembling hands he tore it open. Inside was a letter, the paper aged but carefully folded. He unfolded it slowly, afraid of what it might say. To Elias, if you're reading this, it means I've gone where rivers end and peace begins. But don't let that make you sad. I've had my time. You were the second chance I never thought I'd get. That night in the rain when you gave me your umbrella, you gave me more than shelter. You reminded me that good still exists in the world. You see, Elias, I wasn't just an old man wandering. I was a man waiting. Waiting for someone brave enough to finish what I couldn't. You did that. You didn't just expose a lie. You rebuilt something I thought was gone. Hope. So now I leave you something small but meaningful. Go to the riverbank where we used to stand. You'll find a box buried beneath the old oak tree. It's not money. It's not gold. It's a piece of truth that belongs to you. Keep it safe. And when life tests you again, remember, storms don't destroy everyone. Some people are made to walk through them. Karim Elias's hand shook slightly as he read the words. His throat tightened, but he smiled. The kind of smile that comes when tears and peace meet halfway. Mina came forward quietly. Is that from him? Elias nodded. Yes, his last gift. Without another word, he put on his coat and stepped out into the rain. The path to the river felt the same as it always had. Soft earth, the smell of wet leaves and the low hum of running water. The old oak tree stood tall, its branches swaying gently in the wind. Elias knelt down, the rain soaking through his clothes. With his bare hands, he began to dig into the soft soil beneath the tree. After a few minutes, his fingers hit something hard, a small wooden box. He pulled it out, wiped it clean, and opened it. Inside was a single object, a folded piece of newspaper carefully wrapped in plastic. He unfolded it, and his breath caught. It was an old article from 7 years ago. The headline read, "Local mechanic accuses business partner of fraud. Case dismissed for lack of evidence." And beneath it was a photo of him. Younger, angry, lost. But Karim had written something across the top of the article in blue ink. A simple line. He was right. Elias stared at those 3 words for a long time, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Karim had kept this in all those years. Proof that even when the world didn't believe him, someone had. Tears mixed with the rain on his face. He whispered, "Thank you, old man. You saw me when no one else did." He folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the box. Then he looked at the river and said softly, "You can rest now, Karim. The truth found its home." As Elias walked back to the shop, the rain lightened to a drizzle. The sound of his footsteps on the wet road matched the rhythm of peace inside him. When he reached the door, Mina looked up. "Did you find it?" Elias nodded. "Yes, and I found him too, in a way." She smiled softly. "He'd be proud of you." Elias looked around the shop, at the customers chatting, at Mina's son laughing at the sound of tools clinking, and said, "He already is." That night, after closing the shop, Elias took out Karim's gold pen and the newspaper clipping. He placed them side by side in a glass frame on the wall. Above it he wrote in clear, steady letters, "The truth may be delayed, but it never disappears." Every person who came into the shop afterward saw it. Some smiled, some asked about it, and Elias would simply reply, "That's my story," and his. As the months passed, the shop grew busier. Elias's apprentices learned well. Mina expanded the bookkeeping, and the little business began to thrive. But more importantly, the people trusted it. Every now and then when it rained, Elias would stand by the door watching the water fall from the roof. He'd think of the night it all began, a soaked old man, a simple act of kindness, and an umbrella that changed 2 lives. He realized something then. Sometimes the smallest gesture becomes the seed of the greatest story, and sometimes the people we help in passing are sent to help us return to ourselves. One evening, as the sun sank beyond the river, Elias closed the shop and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain again, soft, cool, clean. He looked up at the sky and smiled. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered, "I gave you my umbrella that night, Karim. But you gave me my soul back." The wind moved through the trees gently, almost as if answering him. A few drops of rain fell. Light, kind, familiar. Elias laughed softly and lifted his face to the sky, letting them touch his skin. He whispered one last line, not for Karim, not for Haroun, but for himself. "The rain doesn't remind me of loss anymore. It reminds me of who I became because of it." And as the night settled in, Elias Carter walked home through the rain. Not as the man who was betrayed, but as the man who turned betrayal into light.